Well, it's another Thursday night and we are coming to you live from Auckland Park in Johannesburg. This is Economics Unbound. I'm Thandeka Gqubule Mbeki. Welcome to it. Of course, I'm not alone. I'm with my co-anchor, Nana, and she's right here.
Hello and welcome. On this show, we break down complex business issues.
That's right, Nana. And tonight we're looking at monopolies. In the preface of his book titled The Idea of Justice, the renowned economist and Nobel Prize winner Amartya Sen says, "The strong perception of manifest injustice applies to all human beings. What moves us is not the realization that the world falls short of being completely just, but that we fail to address the injustice that we have the ability to eliminate." So today we focus on economic justice, or the lack thereof, in our industry. We zoom in on the proverbial economic David and Goliath, and the spotlight falls on the small guys who try to muscle in on large established industries, the small pharmacist who battles clicks in a shopping mall, or the spaza shop trying to tread water next to Spa in a township, or the mom trying to make school uniforms and shut out of the market. Some small guys win, but most lose. The economy cannot afford for the small guy to lose too often.
Tans, doesn't the small guy often bring innovation, employment, and dynamism to the market, while the big guys often collude to keep prices high and out of the reach of ordinary folds?
So this is indeed the question, Nana. And to you all out there, this is the question we would like you to contemplate.
Hey, actually, Tans, this reminds me of the Francis Edgeworth's limit theorem. It examines a range of possible outcomes that may result from exchanges in a free market or trade between groups of people. It indicates that while the exact location of the final settlement between the parties cannot be determined, there is a range of potential outcomes which shrink as the number of traders increase.
Nana, it's as though you're reading my mind. Tonight, I ask the question, what has accounted for this concentration in our industries? Why is it taking so long for us to bring about necessary changes? And then we use game theory to kick things up a notch or two. Nana, do you know what game theory is?
Isn't game theory a basic analysis of tactics between two or more players?
Wow, Nana.
But wait, what does it have to do with our topic tonight?
Well, Nana, you're on a roll tonight. Game theory is essentially the study of all contending strategies in a game in order to predict an outcome. In economics, game theory is often applied to study monopolies and anti-competitive behavior. Have a look at this.
A monopoly is a situation in which one entity dominates a certain market, whereas when it comes to oligopolies, you have a few large players that dominate. In contrast, perfect competition would involve an ideal scenario in which there are lots of sellers, few to no barriers to entry, rational buyers, and so on. Monopolies and oligopolies end up existing for reasons such as 1. The product or service in question simply being a lot better or perceived that way. For example, Google's search engine. 2. Government-imposed barriers to entry, with utility companies being a good example. 3. Other barriers to entry, such as huge initial investments or groundbreaking innovation being required to stand a chance. So, why do monopolies and oligopolies tend to be considered bad? Well, primarily due to 1. Price fixing, so being able to set almost any price, due to inelastic demand, or in other words, due to people not having a lot of flexibility and being pretty much forced to buy from you. 2. Inferior products being accepted because, again, people have nowhere to go in the absence of meaningful alternatives. 3. Less of a desire to innovate because things are already going well as it is. 4. The ability to strong-arm suppliers who are dependent on you. On the one hand, lots of people think action needs to be taken to combat monopolies and oligopolies, for example through fines or new legislation. Others, however, point out that by doing that you're interfering with the free market and punishing success. What do you think?
Hair short.
Thanks, Gary. And on a more serious note, load shedding is back. Where's my cup?
Do you need help? Okay.
Yo, all this serious deserves a glass of not so serious. Come fill yours with Tops at Spa.
SABC Anchor invites you and your loved ones to celebrate Valentine's Month with us. It's that time to spread the love.
Would you marry me?
Of course I will.
Time to spend quality time with Faye. Time to tune in to SABC Anchor, DSTV channel 156. Timeless.
My name is Sihle Tetwa. I am 28 years old. I fell pregnant at the age of 17. I was in a relationship with a partner who was 10 years older than me. I don't even think it was a conscious decision to stop using protection. It was just like, okay, so we don't have, like pregnancy was the furthest thing from my mind. I didn't think I would fall pregnant. And then I fell pregnant. That's when my world changed. Like, that's when everything stopped for a moment. Like, okay, so many things went through my head. Like, what am I gonna do with the child? How are the people at school gonna look at me? My mom, my family. What happens to my dreams? Like, my future? Using a condom gives me the chance to make a decision about what the next move is. At least I know now that a condom will definitely prevent so many unnecessary things from happening. Condoms give me peace of mind so that I can live my life with confidence.
Use a condom. Have peace of mind. Hashtag no regrets.
Now, let's take a look at the Competition Commission. It's a regulatory body that is responsible for promoting economic development and regulating competition in our market. It must also ensure competitive prices and an array of product choices. And its scope is very wide. It's probed the construction sector, the health sector, the financial sector, and it has found that at least 17 banks have been fingered in price fixing and currency manipulation. More recently, we covered the Competition Commission's hearings into school uniform collusion. Here's what unfolded there.
Parents want to offer their children what they regard as a better education, yet already have to fork out thousands of rands in school fees and can hardly afford the uniforms. Their cries are about to be heard. This after an investigation into exclusive uniform deals and persistent complaints. The Commission, ISASA and the FEDSAS have vowed to work together.
We are therefore grateful to count on these stakeholders, these schools, but we also call upon others to join. You will realize that we have specifically prioritized big school groups and big schools to set an example for others. And they themselves said at the tribunal today that they hope that their settlement with the Commission will pave way for others to do the same.
The Commission is looking into long-term deals between schools and exclusive uniform suppliers. Meanwhile, ISASA and FEDSAS have also pledged to work their member schools contracting several school uniform suppliers as well as adopting generic cheap uniforms.
Parents can shop wherever they'd like. The more exclusive the school uniform gets, then it is then when the school governing bodies have to conclude agreements with certain suppliers to make those exclusive school uniforms for their schools. So the more generic you make your school uniforms, the easier it is for parents to shop around.
While it zooms in on the issue of uniforms, the Commissioner says it's not an attempt to force the schools to adopt to their own uniform style. Lindo Buhle, SABC News, Pretoria.
Many economists have been arguing for policies to break up historic monopolies and oligopolies. They want to make space for emerging small to medium-sized economic players. In countries like Indonesia, which has full employment, meaning unemployment is at 5% or below, the small and medium enterprises are the big job creators and employers. To do this, a country needs robust laws protecting small players. Tans, could our competition laws be lax and passive? Let's find out. In a bid to tighten competition laws in the country, President Cyril Ramaphosa recently signed the Competition Amendment Act into law. It aims to redress exclusionary conduct by dominant companies and the inability for new entrants to compete against established firms, which is the true definition of monopolizing. Now, monopolies are generally considered to have disadvantages, such as higher prices and fewer incentives to be efficient. However, in certain circumstances, the advantages of monopolies can outweigh their costs. Monopolies can make supernormal profit, which can be used to fund high-cost capital investment spending. Successful research can then be used for improved products and lower costs in the long term. An additional advantage is economies of scale. An increase in output leads to a decrease in average cost of production, leaving the consumer to enjoy lower prices. Monopolies also introduce an element of international competitiveness. Companies who dominate domestic markets have a better chance of success when competing globally. Another potential advantage of monopolies is that they can use a supernormal profit to subsidize socially useful but loss-making services. Now, on the contrary, monopolies restrict free trade and could result in one of the following disadvantages. 1. Price fixing. Now, they can do this regardless of demand because they know consumers have nowhere else to turn. Number 2, supplying products of inferior quality. Number 3, monopolies lose any drive to innovate or provide new and improved products. Number 4, since they can set the price to whatever they want, they can also create what is called cost-push inflation. Now, to avoid this kind of anti-competitive behavior, South Africa has a regulatory body that is meant to keep the playing field level.
So the question is our Competition Commission strong on the weak and weak on the powerful? So we are joined by Thembinkosi Bonakele, a commissioner, and by Khomolimo Kekesi, a lawyer in the competition space. Good evening and welcome to Economics Unbound.
Good evening.
Now, are you strong on the weak and weak on the strong?
I believe that the Competition Commission is a very strong agency. It certainly has proven that through the prosecution of many of the cases, some of which you have mentioned. It has imposed very heavy penalties where you've had your sort of naked transgressions of competition law, like when people get together to fix prices or rig tenders for government, like in the construction sector. We have had the highest fine at 1.5 billion against ArcelorMittal a few years ago. So I think that is growing from strength to strength. But of course, that doesn't mean that there are no problems in the economy. The fact that we are still uncovering cartels means that there are still problems.
Why do you think that our economy lends itself to such collusive behavior and such concentration of monopolies in key sectors?
Many of our problems are historical. This was a closed economy. People forget that. Not so long ago, it was highly concentrated. You had like one firm at some point responsible for about 40% of capitalization of the JSE. That was the old Anglo. So to break that up, to kind of liberalize such a concentrated market is going to take time.
Have we done all we can in these 25 years to really break up those monopolies? Have we brought the legislative muscle, the legal muscle to do that? And have we brought the goodwill for other players to come into the space? Have we enabled small players to fight against the big guys?
I think that the competition law tries to level the playing field. There are other aspects that are important for new entrants in a market, for SMMEs to thrive. We know that, for an example, finance is a big issue. We also know that the the ability of SMMEs to do business, to enter the mainstream economy. If you are a small player, you are producing clothes. Where are you going to sell them? Are you going to sell them from the boot of your car, or are you going to get some space in a large retailer? Those are important facts.
So these factors lie outside your own space. They lie in DTI. Are you saying that they lie with the Department of Trade and Industry to facilitate and increase access to markets and access to capital? And why has that not taken place? Why have the policies not synergized over the years to create a better competitive space for both the small guy and the others?
I think there have been various initiatives. I think the latest is the recognition that even competition law can do more. For example, the amendments that have recently been signed by the president, they seek, amongst other things, to force large players to trade with SMMEs. For example, now you are not allowed to refuse to buy from SMMEs purely because they are small, or purely because the businesses are black. So there is recognition that perhaps South Africa didn't need your kind of old traditional competition laws, given the kind of challenge we have of high concentration and a culture of collusion, because collusion is partly a culture, because this was a small economy controlled by a few people. They all knew each other. They were all doing business with one another. It was very easy. The cartels we find in this country are of a particular demographic. You wouldn't find women, for example, in a cartel meeting more generally.
So do you think that we should have specific areas where monopolies or large companies of a certain size are not allowed to enter? For example, in rural areas or in townships, or could we introduce mechanisms to protect women's businesses, for example?
Absolutely. I think that there is scope. I mean, obviously, you want, once you've supported people, to be able to stand on their own. If you look at regulated sectors, think of a small retail situation such as liquor. I mean, why are we giving large retailers liquor licenses to sell alcohol in shopping malls, in townships? For me, this is an opportunity you should be giving to people who want to enter where it's going to make the biggest difference. If you're giving it to large retailers, when you have the opportunity to grant or refuse a license, I think you are wasting an opportunity. So there are sectors like that where I certainly think that you can carve out certain things for SMMEs, for a particular type of businesses in rural areas, co-ops, for an example. You could carve out certain space, because government owns markets. The fresh produce markets are owned by municipalities, the largest here in Johannesburg. There's no reason why they wouldn't carve out some of their space there for emerging farmers.
Yes, Gqubule, let me bring you in right here. Can you tell us whether the law governing competition in our country is really a work in progress at this stage, and it's in the early stages of its emergence? Are we doing enough to make sure that the law has enough bite?
Well, look, I mean, the current legislation, just prior to being recently amended, only came into force, I think, around about 1999, 98. So it's still in its infancy. Prior to that, we did have a competition board, but, the law was not really effectively enforced. I think in terms of the spirit of the current law and the new amendments that have been introduced, there really is I think at an executive and legislative level, a recognition that, I think largely because of the success of the work of the Competition Commission as a regulator, there's much more that perhaps can be done in order to address the inequalities of the past at an economic level. I think at a principal level, the topics the law covers are right and appropriate. So you're looking at, companies who are independent operators must compete aggressively for customers and offer competitive pricing and quality and be innovative. When you're looking at suppliers and customers, they must be fair dealing in terms of where distribution happens there. If one is quite large and one is quite small, there's a kind of a way of preventing an abuse by the large supplier or customer vis-a-vis the small one. So I think in terms of big topics and high-level things, the law is right, and the kind of current amendments that have come in are trying to, reshuffle the skewed ownership of things. Yeah. And as Tembi has already intimated, the manner in which even a large buyer deals with a large supplier is now being looked at. The way we looked at the differences in pricing for the same product is being looked at specifically, uniquely now for small or black-owned entities. So I think the spirit of the law is great. But I think when you talk about competition issues, our population shouldn't confuse it with broader economic issues. We cannot, through the competition legislation, in my humble view, fix.
But the law can harmonize, can it not? And the policy can harmonize.
So we've always had this debate as practitioners, economists, regulators, that competition law is but one of what should be a much broader policy framework. So, for instance, if you're trying to protect local ownership of entities to prevent a lot of our money going offshore, or for a lot of South African entities being owned by international players, you have to have a special regulatory regime for that to work with what we're doing in the competition space.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say are the two most important things that the law can give competition dynamics in our country?
How can the law improve?
How can it improve? Two things.
So I think in terms of detecting practices that are problematic, the law, in my view, is great. It's the remedial actions that I think are inadequate. It's also the manner in which the tests are set. They're quite difficult. So if we look at the economic tests for instance, abuse of dominant, that's a very difficult test to prove. And Thembi Nkosi, with no exaggeration, will say that there have been many, many hurdles for the authorities to properly prosecute and prevent abuse of dominance. So if you set the tests at a level that is, I think, a lot easier, perhaps I can fix things. And I think if you set the right type of remedies and empower the authorities to, impose the right kind of remedies, I think that can speak quite well to preventative measures as well.
And what would you say to the small guys? How should they compete in such a market that's dominated by large players?
Well, I think there are opportunities now with the law. People, for an example, as I indicated, may not be refused to participate in a market merely because of their size. But as Gqubule says, it's not just about competition regulation. It's also about all of these other things that SMMEs want. And I absolutely agree with you. At some level, you need a lot of coordination between and amongst various policy instruments, your funding side, your regulation side, market access issues. These are very, very important. But I think for a small player, the important thing that I find is people need to know where to go.
Well, thank you for joining us, my dear guest. That was very informative. And I would like to thank the Competition Commission. You've been very cooperative throughout the week, and a flurry of activity in your sector, and a lot of work to watch there. And now that was an interesting discussion, wouldn't you say so, Nana?
So it appears we're making strides as a country. Many institutions, including the Reserve Bank and the Department of Trade and Industry, are working together to referee the fights between the Davids and the Goliaths. To the Davids out there, listen up. Even after things change in your favor, you will have to master strategy. To the corporate giants, cheers for now. The game, it's about to change. Tans, who's winning the chess match?
No one yet, but like in the game of chess, competition is governed by rules. In the 1776 economic classic titled The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith describes the ability of a free market to allocate productive resources where they are most needed and most efficiently. He says competition is inherent to markets. It is a sort of pressure that tends to move resources. Even though he did not favor the hand of the regulator here or the hand of state intervention, it seems that history is proving that it is the rules of the game, together with the hand of the market, that work together to determine the nature of competition. Would that more fairness was introduced in the interests of economic justice? Masterovia to the Russians who mastered this game, and good night, dear guests.